Welcome to our video series on generative AI. I'm Kevin Boyd, the CIO at the University of Chicago, and I'm very pleased to have with me today Professor Bo Li. And Professor Li and I are going to be talking about privacy and ethics in the context of generative AI.
Very exciting topic. Thank you, Kevin.
Thrilled to have you here. So, to start off, maybe you could explain why data ethics and foundational to the development and application of AI technology.
Yeah, definitely. So as we all know that currently people say data is the oil of the society. They have powered a lot of applications, like including financial, healthcare, autonomous driving, etc., etc. However, on the other hand, we can see that data has brought us a lot of security, privacy, ethics concerns as well, because the data usually is high dimension in our world, and also they could have noise, and the label could be noise, and data itself could be noise, and the data collected from real world could be biased, depends on where and how you collect. Actually, those fundamental issues of the data will lead to potential privacy ethics issues of the trained model, trained platform, trained pipeline. So this way, we really need to understand and care about how we can be aware and mitigate potential ethics, privacy issues of the data.
So what would you say are really the most pressing privacy and security challenges facing AI today, especially, building on what you're talking about with personal and
Yeah, exactly. Good question. So basically, for current data in real world, especially, it's very hard to guarantee that all the data we get is fair. For example, we need to protect the privacy, sensitive information of the data. But usually, we know we have used a lot of data to train, say, our large foundation models and multimodality models. So it's really hard to make sure every data trained in the be protected or encrypted. So I would say that one of the most challenge of the data is that the high dimensional, the noise in the data, and the unbalanced collection of the data.
When you say high dimensional, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so the data itself, for example, natural language we have. So it's really diverse, and it's we belong to different domains and cover different topics. And also have different tones. All these dimensions make it very hard to regulate and capture and basically verify their privacy, their ethic guarantees.
Okay, interesting. So in the context of AI, are there ways that data should be ethically collected and used? Would you say that there are specific principles that should be followed?
Yeah, there have been several principles. For example, from the application driven, people say, for example, for healthcare domain, we should remove information, or from the regulation perspective, there are a lot of regulation like GDPR and other EU Act, etc., to tell us what's safety, privacy perspectives, and we should be care about. But you can imagine, since again, the high dimensional and the unstructured nature of lots of data and the multimodality nature of data, it's really hard to make sure they satisfy all these constraints we give, and also very hard to audit these types of constraints. So that's again become very challenging. Yeah.
Would you say that there are ways that to train these models could lead to unfair outcomes, and are there ways that bias gets introduced into these models?
Definitely, yeah. Unfortunately, I would say. So we have done a lot of research along this line. For example, we look at most capable model currently like GPT-4, GPT 3.5 recently, and then we find that indeed the model could be very biased, and we actually conduct a systematic study. The different stereotype bias and different sensitive information, how biased they could be. First of all, we find they could be very biased, and the second of all, very interesting, they can be overkilled as well, because people as us trying to fix the bias issue. And then one interesting example is that recently we evaluated with DALL-E 3, and then we actually query the model to say, give me some pictures of computer scientists, and coming out, the result is mostly female. Very surprising, and it's kind of a lot of people have discovered related phenomena. It's a little bit overkill in terms of the fairness. So we have to do a very good balance. Yeah.
Interesting. And I think Google's had some challenges with bias in their Gemini engine recently, haven't they?
That's another example of overkill, I would say. Yeah.
Interesting. I think it's safe to say that fairness in AI is critical. Are there things that can be done to ensure that AI models make decisions that are fair and equitable?
It's a little bit hard because the model is powered by data. If the data have noise and like bias or things, it could lead to, say, unfair decision or like unethical decision potentially. So is a potential big issue. A lot of researchers from academia industry and people are getting along and trying to discuss and have benchmarks, have method, have mitigation approaches, even like a certification, theoretical guarantees to help regulate the model and audit model to make sure the decision is fair as much as possible.
So continuing in that same vein, sometimes we talk about transparency. And I think transparency is a challenge with some of these AI models, where sometimes it seems to produce, depending on the context, very meaningful or accurate results. But sometimes the how, the why seems like a black box.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about how developers can make their AI systems more transparent, more understandable?
Yeah, very good question. So transparency has been, or another word like explainable AI has been a long trajectory. Lots of people are devoting a lot of effort there, and I would say there have been good progresses. It's still a long way to go because the model currently, especially when the model become larger and larger, and there are more complicated internal connections inside. So it's really hard to completely open the model as a white box. But basically, currently, when we do expandable AI, we have different levels. Like on the data level, like which piece of data lead to certain decisions. And there have been lots of analysis here called the data explanation or data valuation. And going toward onwards, we have like model level, like the people have been looking at, say, the internal connections, activations of the neural, etc., and try to understand. And currently with large language model foundation models, you can also ask the model to explain themselves for their decision and their predictions. That's also great. But also be careful that the model's explanation itself could be biased again. So it becomes a very interesting loop.
And when you ask the model to explain it, is that typically reliable? Is providing a truthful answer?
Yeah, I would say yes or no. So we have to about the queries for how to explain and say if we directly say why you make this decision, it will be more or less like model could hallucinate and makes up some evidence for his own decision. But we could ask particularly for certain component and certain angles and ask about certain evidence, like ask whether the model uses evidence or not, like give more choice to guide the model. And this way, so sometimes the model can explain it like in a more reliable way. But I would say this being like finalized as a principal way yet. So a lot of things to explore.
Interesting. Can you talk a little bit about the concept of informed consent as it's applied to AI? What are the challenges this presents for large-scale data collection and analysis?
Yeah, exactly. So for large-scale data collection, currently we have pipeline like a certain like a finalized pipeline from the industry and academia perspective. Like people agree like we should clean them, and we should use model to clean them. We should use human annotation clean them, and then we should have certain evaluation model benchmarks to again verify and get consensus on how clean or how fair the data is. But essentially, I would say everyone has their slightly different principles and goals. For example, recently one of our work is that we pass through all the AI-related regulations and a company model ethics, privacy, security, etc. And we find that every company has slightly different focus in terms of the categories, in terms of the strengths of the privacy, ethics, security. So I would say still currently people have their own principles, and hopefully we can reach certain point that everyone agree on certain levels, and will join the effort to have a more agreement over different areas, domains, and academia, industry. Yeah.
So that potentially also gets into issues of it's the data that's being used to train the model. Is it actually in the public domain? Is that one of the challenges that some of these models have today as well?
Yeah, very good point. That's indeed another challenge in terms of the model IP issues that there have been a lot of, I would say, lawsuits and discussions on that already. I think that's indeed one challenge. On one hand, there are a lot of IP protected data. We cannot use them directly to train open models. And if we don't protect those data, then you can see it will cause societal issues about privacy, about IP, protection for human who actually pay a lot of effort to create those products and data. So yeah, we do need to address it as a challenging point.
Interesting. So thinking about sort of the broad society, feels like every month there are more and more potential impacts. Are there ways that you can help to ensure that the benefits of AI are distributed equitably, fairly, and that we minimize the potential harm of AI?
Yeah, that's a very challenging question. I think that's all my research mainly focused on. I think eventually everyone hope we can have a way to ensure the benefits and the advantage of AI to different domains, and we hope we can provide guarantees or verifications for that. For example, for autonomous driving, we are not satisfied say, oh, this car is 98 safe in this city. We have to give guarantee the lower bound of the risks, or a low higher bound, upper bound of risk, or lower bound of accuracy, or things like that. But I think we have not been there yet, because the models are keep developing, and every day we have new features and new capabilities of model. And whenever they have a new feature, new capability, there is another level of risks, and we need to be aware and be try to mitigate. Therefore, we are still in kind of I would say from the attacker and defender perspective, like a cat and mouse, to develop and protect and red teaming and then again protect. I think eventually, hopefully, we'll achieve certain equilibrium. I don't know how long it will take, but I think we are making good progresses.
So you raised sort of an interesting question there. So as each of the large providers, the Googles, the OpenAIs, come out with these new models, understood you correctly, what you're saying is we shouldn't assume that whatever privacy protections, guardrails were in place in their in their prior model exist in the new model. Is that fair?
I think the twofold. One is we cannot assume that, because after you fine tune the model or you update the model, some feature could keep or lose, and we don't know. And second of all, we even cannot assume model will be safer and more fair, etc. Because in our past study, which is a platform called Decoding Trust, we actually find that surprisingly, GPT-4 is more vulnerable than 3.5. To when you give this red teaming or adversarial probing, and the potential reason is also understandable in the sense that indeed GPT-4 is more capable in terms of instruction following, etc. In this way, if you have a little bit adversarial, misleading information in your system prompt, user prompt, etc., then the model will immediately follow, and then they become more vulnerable, and we find that they could leak private information more effectively than GPT 3.5. Yeah, so this paper also got the best paper award at last year in Europe. But this observation have been consistent over different perspectives we evaluated, fairness, robustness, ethics, privacy, etc. So I think we need to be aware of that.
Interesting. You mentioned red teaming a couple times. Our audience, what red teaming is?
Yeah, I realize that. So I think for red teaming, that we try to understand the vulnerabilities or uncover the weakness of the models. So we put on a wet hat, and then try to say we generate different attack strategies and give different adversary capabilities, and try to prompt the model and see whether it will make mistakes, whether it will lead potential consequences before it actually happens in real world. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so thinking about the future, what would you say are some of the challenges or opportunities in thinking about ethical and safe use of And are there some things that the academic community can do to help?
Yeah, definitely. So first of all, I think from the fundamental perspective, we do need to understand, for example, from theoretical point of view, why the model make like these types of issues in terms of ethics, privacy, security, and whether there is a fundamental trade-off among those perspectives. Sometimes we find if the model is more robust, it will be, more private, which is good, but it could be less accurate. So whether those trade-offs are fundamental or not, so that we know whether we can achieve the best of all the worlds. So that's also something we are working on, and I see a lot of groups are paying great effort on it. And on the other hand, how we can generate the challenging data to probe the model and understand the vulnerabilities of it. So currently we know a little bit, but I think there are still discovered yet. And after that, eventually we want to look into, definitely based on the vulnerability we found, how we can mitigate them. And this is again very challenging. So basically, I think there are a lot of interesting things to explore, but eventually I think, as you just mentioned, we hope to reach the point that we can give certain guarantees of the model fairness, ethics, so that others can be confident to use the model. So I would say currently we have developed a lot of models, but to deploy them in real world is still a challenge. And the gap between development and deployment is the safety and ethical privacy concerns that we need to be able to be confident about them, and then we can safely deploy them in the world.
Very interesting. So many considerations about safety.
Yeah, exactly.
Professor Lee, thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate it. This was interesting.
Very interesting. Thank you for having me today. Yeah, thank you.
And thank you for joining us for this segment about ethics and privacy in generative AI. We hope that you'll join us for more of the segments in this series. I'm Kevin Boyd, the CIO at the University. Thank you.